We are live. Hi, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another week. We are going to be going over Core Competency, ICF Core Competency number 8, numero ocho. I'm going to turn it over to Jerome and go away for a minute, but I'll be back.
Hello, everybody. And yes, we are going to complete the 4-part series of the updated Core Competencies explanation by us. And we will be doing number 8 today, which is facilitating client growth. So we usually hop in, but we do have Dan joining us today. So if I can just give him 1 second to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Goodbye,
There
Dan.
you go.
See you later.
Amazing, dazzling introduction. So without further ado, we will go ahead and hop in because this one is pretty meaty. So we want to go ahead and get in early. And I will start by defining it. So the definition of facilitates client growth is partners with the client to transform learning and insight into action, promotes client autonomy in the coaching process.
So this seems like this is the whole point of coaching. Like, this is where every core competency leads to. All of that other stuff is great on its own, but without this last point, it's not really coaching if there's no action involved. You're just sort of having conversation and saying goodbye and waiting for the next conversation to happen. So this seems like probably the most important one.
Well, the part that adds to the importance as you're speaking, Anthony, is that it's the client's job to make the growth and the action step. Mm-hmm. And that definition kind of just leads to that concept where it's reaffirmed that they are having that transformation and learning and insight into that action. When it adds to promote the client's autonomy, which means living and breathing without us on the outside so that they can continue that growth process.
And there's also a space in here of the transforming the learning in the definition and insight into action. Not every session has an action step. So the question there, if we've done I hate the word now, but an unpacking session where a lot of stuff has come forward, it's about asking what's the learning that comes from that and how will you apply the learning going forward, not necessarily what's your next action step.
Wouldn't that be considered the action step then, to maybe, for next session or until next session, think about what did you, the client, get from talking about this? What did you learn and how can you apply it? Even if it's not really like, this is a thing that I can do to achieve X, Y, and Z goal, it's still something that the client can do.
It could just be a level of awareness of how, now that you know this thing from this conversation, how are you going to show up differently from this moment forward?
I think that too. I think we should start to do the points because I think as we normally do, a lot will come forward as we go through them. Yeah. Jerome or Lisa, do you want to read the first point?
Yeah, let's give it to Lisa. Go ahead and read off the first point.
Works with the client to integrate new awareness, insight, or learning into the worldview and behaviors.
See, the problem is, the reason I read them is because I am not an auditory learner.
It's about that awareness piece. It's that awareness piece that we were just speaking about as far as that definition. It's helping that client come to who they are and what they want, where they want to go, and what they need along the way. And how do they want to behave from there, right?
Integrate new awareness, insight, or learning into their worldview and behaviors. So I think that end part is kind of interesting, right? That promotes insight or learning into their worldview and behaviors.
That's kind of leading into beliefs, don't we think?
Could be.
Yeah.
Maybe they came up against the limiting belief, realized that it was false. And now what's the new thing that's replaced it, and how do they begin being different in the world now that the limiting belief has been weakened or removed?
Mm-hmm. It's that, I think, a little bit taking that, this is what I did in the session, this thing that I do in the session is not exclusively in the it's to be applied to real life and taken with me, and hopefully, you can have a great session and then do nothing with it, but it's that bringing it into the real world kind of piece, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's why that question at the end of the session that we drive home so hard in level 1 and level 2, asking the client, what is your takeaway from this? That they have to speak the learning, because in speaking the learning, then they become aware of it and ideally carry it forward with our next question of how do you apply it?
I think a lot of coaches or untrained coaches will start telling them what they're supposed to do and what their takeaway is. Whereas what we're talking about is having the client be responsible and share that information.
This seems like it would be a very difficult step for the client, because if you've accumulated years of habits and behaviors that reinforce this limiting belief, you can always learn something or know something that to be true in the session and think in your head, okay, this is really how it is. But getting that to feel that way and to act that way in the real life, that seems like where there might be problems outside the coaching session for the client. So I guess working to integrate that is probably a big portion of how can I live this in my life day to day, what I learned, and not give up, I guess.
Well, that's where the baby steps kind of thing, right? And the forgiveness, and why that's such an important piece with coaching is that we understand that our clients will have missteps, or that's part of the process, part of the learning, and that forgiveness piece and forgiving yourself is critical as well.
Are they missteps, or are they steps that were just misunderstood?
Well, side steps maybe, or a tap dance. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, and many of the steps that we do take, which is what Dan's pointing out, lead to unknown future directions that we didn't realize that these steps were going to help in that future place.
Well, there's no such thing as mistakes. They're just learning opportunities and accelerators to change.
That's true. That's true. However, when I think of our students, when a lot of the times they come back, they're so afraid to make a mistake that they want to do it perfectly. They stay in their head more often than just to get into the natural cadence of being curious and inquiring and finding out and pulling that information from our clients, their clients.
So being afraid of mistakes is a mistake.
Yes, exactly.
Boom!
I think, shall we try out number 2 now? Are we feeling like it might be a good thing? Anybody else want to take a turn reading number 2?
Go ahead.
Before we do, in the space of it, I'd like to ask Anthony, in that awareness that being afraid of mistakes is a mistake, what did you learn in making that statement?
I learned, and I'll try to integrate into my life, that if I'm afraid of making a mistake, that's a good signal that I should just go for whatever it is I'm trying to go for. That's my flag that says, okay, green is go for this because you're afraid. So I'm not trying to eliminate the fear of mistakes. I'm trying to use that fear as a signal to go head first.
Well, it also means you care, right? If you are uncaring, you're just going to do it any which way. But because you are a caring soul, you want to do it in a way that has a positive result in your view. But your ability to push through it anyways, push through the fear and do it anyways, very cool.
And what positive result? Well, we're not going to get into that. That could go down a rabbit hole right there. So I'm just going to avoid the rabbit hole, and let's go to number 2, shall we? I'll read it this time. Partners with clients to design goals, actions, and accountability measures that integrate and expand new learning.
When we say partner, can someone help me explain that? Just because I believe that can be misinterpreted pretty harshly.
Like I'm dating my client. Like
in this specific context, when we're talking about partnering with the client, especially when we're speaking about designing goals and actions, what does that mean?
Whoever wrote the copy for this just had to find another word for works.
I have been there. Okay, I have been in this seat of like trying to find words that are not help. And it's actually there should be more of these in the English language. I feel like because I really don't feel like there are enough because the options are sparse.
But we're here to hopefully kind of shake free of some of that muddied waters there. So, in this specific context, what do you guys think, partners?
I mean, there's like earthquake. What happened there?
Oh, sorry, I've got short cables and I hit them by mistake, and it went crashing. So that partnering concept, you're right, Anthony. A lot of times people, coaches get that misconstrued because they'll start prescribing what their clients ought to be doing, and what we are is more of that place. Somebody has said, well, we're like a empty vessel. We're like a flower vase, and you pour into the flower. Okay, yes, whatever that is, the correct term is, we're not going to come in and say, here's what you do. We're going to pull that information from our clients. Pulling that information out, we're going to gather all kinds of information, data, fear, emotions, happy, sad, mad, all of that comes out. So as they're speaking and we're doing our coaching thing, that's how we're partnering with them, by asking questions, staying present with them, following their patterns of what they're sharing and reflecting that back. So they're able to hear what they're saying and either agree or disagree or contemplate the direction they want to go with that. Would you add something different, Dan?
Yeah, and I think that while the word partner can have some gray to it, that the words that aren't there are exactly what you were talking about. We're not leading, we're not directing, we're not prescribing, we're not choosing for. We're pulling it out of them and asking. The partnership here comes in and getting maybe some of the specifics or getting the emotion that's connected to it for the client, but not telling them what it is.
Yeah.
It's like the I want to be rich statement. So we talk about, it's like, what does that mean? What does it mean? I need to do this thing. Tell me what that means to do that thing.
So it's bringing all these sort of heady, sort of out there, abstract goals that they have and asking, what does it look like in the real world to you? How can you identify it? And then with the accountability measures as well, like how are you going to keep yourself accountable to either you, the coach, or people in the client's life to keep them on track? Because I think accountability is probably a big part of people keeping to these goals.
It is, and there's a big thing there that I actually got a note on in one of my PCC calls. In between sessions, the coach is not the accountability partner. In session, we're the accountability partner, but at the end of a session, if we close and say, how can I best support you moving forward? That question and the way it's worded, at least according to one ICF reviewer that reviewed my call, said the coach was creating dependency on the client by asking it in that way.
That's interesting to know, because I've heard some people say, like some people when they run their coaching business say, oh, you get unlimited text and email to keep up with me and be accountable, but maybe that might not be the best thing to do anymore.
It might offer a space between if they need it.
So
but how do they hold themselves? Go ahead.
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say if they tap back into you and hold themselves accountable to that and they're sharing with you. But if you're tapping back in with them, I think that's where the mistake is.
Okay, I see. So it's not like you're constantly checking up on them. You're letting them come to you.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's they have, if you're going to put that into your coaching agreement where they can come to you in between, then you put X amount of times, right? So you still hold boundary and space for that, not that they can just anytime do that.
Well, and that's because that could add up to your time really quick, especially given, I mean, it's okay if it's a yes or no answer or short, something quick you can get out.
Mhm.
But if it's anything that is prolonged, it could be, I mean, the length of a session in between sessions. Number 3, shall we?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
acknowledges and supports client autonomy in the design of goals, actions, and methods of accountability. So this is that autonomy piece.
Which is some of what we just were talking about, that tapping back in with us, the autonomy. If we're tapping in with them and checking to see how it's going, where's the autonomy in that piece, and how are they going to be self-reliant, right? Neuron,
Yeah.
they call it. Yeah.
One of the things we always say at CLCI is don't work harder than your client. Don't do more than your client is doing to help them. So actually, they should be doing all the work, really. You should just be there asking questions and being curious. But that's that. I mean, that it carries on. You go on with that and think, don't be attached to outcomes. Don't be work harder than your client. Don't be putting more care, concern, and goal setting into it than your client is. Essentially, let them go out and be and do, and then learn about it when they come back. Right? That space between not talking to them leaves the ability to be curious too. I would think in the next session, if you don't know what happened between, that automatically gives you guys something to talk about to start with. I would think, right?
And
Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Anytime that there is an appointment, there's already work being done. So having that appointment be set is a kind of an accountability piece as well, because they know you're going to ask them about it.
Especially with the payment thing too. I mean, this is one of the things we talk about is that's one of the reasons why charging for your services as a life coach is a good thing, because it's holding them accountable too. It's saying, okay, this goal is worth money, or the work here it has value to me, and that applies to we'll carry through the work as well. The fact that they know they've spent money here will have them put more time and energy into the work of the process as well. Am I wrong there?
No, it's an investment. That's one of the big things in conversation in a slightly different space of it. Coaching as an investment in their life, not a spend. It's not an expense.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
The difference is they see an improvement and a return on the investment, where a spend is, I had a chocolate bar and that was nice and sweet. That was good. And it's gone. And tomorrow it's something else.
Chocolate bar, there's a return on investment sometimes.
Yeah, I'm counting calories on that one.
Especially if it's dark chocolate.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's brief. It's that short-term payoff that's over here, and not to go tomorrow. It's what? Just saying. But an investment into life growth, it's bigger. You can have more chocolate bars.
That's why whenever I buy things like clothes, I'm investing in my wardrobe. It's an investment that way. Makes everything feel better.
I would like to ask, since we do have Dan here, I know I think it was the last live stream we did, we asked the question, since we're talking about autonomy here, is it the goal of a life coach to no longer be of service to their client?
Yeah, basically.
To me it is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, or at least not be, how do I want to say this? To a point where they are not dependent on us, and if in 6 months, if we've reached the first level of growth for them, 6 months or a year later they come back because they've grown and they're up against the next bubble of the comfort zone, sure, come on back in, but it's not about this continuous engagement.
I was just, it's funny, I was just talking about this topic, and we were talking about how there's that, like, always, and my mentor taught me, always be training your replacement, right? You're always training the person so that you can keep moving forward and growing, but you don't want to leave a deficit behind when you do. So like, any company I work with, any client I have, if I no longer work with them, I don't want them to go fail without me. I want them to thrive, because that is an indication that the work we had together is doing well still, and they're building on top of it. So it's, I would never ever want my clients to be at a deficit without my presence at all. Mm-hmm. That would break my heart. But there's that need to be needed, right? We all suffer from that a bit. That like I want to matter, I want to be irreplaceable, but it's an ego check, but very good one when we humble ourselves, I think, and be willing to not be in the picture.
I would also make the argument that coaches work best when there's sort of a narrower band of expertise. So I might be a bit skeptical of a coach who is a relationship coach and also a business coach and also a spiritual coach and this and that kind of coach where they have all these different things. That's not telling me that they're specialized in one area.
I will say, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, whereas if you're a coach who specializes in one area, you're probably going to get more clients because you found your niche. But once you've worked through a goal, a client might have goals they have in other areas of life. Maybe refer them to another coach that you know that specializes in that area, and that's a good way to build networks because people will refer clients to you that way if you specialize in a certain area.
There's that, and there's also the idea that while we specialize, nothing happens in a vacuum.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, is that we're whole people. So at some point, it's all probably going to come up. It's, business, and we're not so compartmentalized that we only can focus on one thing and it doesn't affect other parts of our life. But to Anthony's point, though, you can be very specific. I mean, you want to be specific and working with that ideal client and working in specific areas. And I think it's a great idea to have a referral network. Maybe if that client walking through the door is not at all something you would typically work with, find somebody, you can refer them to somebody that you would, or that would work with them, I should say. There's enough for everybody, right? Share and share alike. I firmly believe that. So
I think now we've sort of got off from the point.
Oh, yeah, we completely redirect. I was just going to bring us back there.
Four.
Are we going to go to number 4?
Supports the client in identifying potential results or learning from identified action steps. What do you think is going to happen? What is the potential outcomes from choosing this path of action?
I want to talk about the learning from identified action steps. What does that mean?
Learning.
I would say putting your client in a space where they imagine that outcome coming to fruition and them kind of going through that process of, is this going to work, just based on the things that we did speak about. And my understanding of, if I were to take this step in whichever direction that I do take that step in, my understanding of whether that's going to work or not.
Well, that and even the learning around actually doing those steps, because they will gather information and emotion and experience around that actual step. So the Imagine is going to help with the setup, but getting out there and doing it, they'll have a different experience. I cut you off, Dan.
No, you were right. That's a perfect. It's so I think of a client I had a couple years ago who set an action step at the end of our first session, and when they came in a week later, they had half of it done, and they felt like they were a failure because they only got half of what they had committed to done.
And you said, absolutely, you are. Get out of my office.
Dude, you're fired. Get out.
I'm done.
I'm going to lunch. See you later. So as we talked through it, realized what did they learn from not getting it done, and it was that they put too much on their plate. They tended to they love to think really big, but then they stressed themselves out, didn't give themselves enough time to really think it through, and so they pulled back a little bit in their goal setting and actually found that got them further ahead.
I think too, this can be in the space of identify, because it says identified action steps. So maybe while that is in the work, I think you can also learn from thinking through the process, right? So I'm thinking, okay, because sometimes if we're jumping on lily pads, going from one to get to the last lily pad, we sometimes want to start on lily pad 5, but we find ourselves on 5 and we don't have the tools, so we have to go to lily pad 3 or 4, 3, 2, 1. And so sometimes by just identifying what those lily pads are, you can then learn, okay, this is the right path. I think maybe I should tweak or turn it here, and not just sort of talking through the actual process, because we can have ideas and they can be all out here, but then talking through the action, you can actually learn a lot from that, I think, I would say.
And we can also ask into it of, like, help me understand how this action steps get you closer to your goal. And then they're speaking into the journey a little bit more and seeing, because we might think they're taking a jump to the right, and they're actually taking a jump forward in their way.
I will say too, like have tools like SWOT analysis and stuff are great in this too, because you can, or even like a do, delegate, delete list kind of thing, where you can look at it all and go, okay, this is what I can do, this is what I can delegate, this is what I don't really need to do. Because sometimes we can get mired in the details, and we can just have somebody else do it, or maybe we don't even, it's not even necessary, right? Especially as business owners, we can get stuck in these little meticulous things when really probably we don't need to be doing that. There's somebody else who can, or it doesn't need to be done at all. But we can be very kind of micromanagey. I don't know who suffers from this. Not me. No.
Not me. No, never. Not me.
But I think though, this learning through that is, I mean, this is that really, I mean, I think this is for me, one of the most valuable things that you can get out of coaching is that learning, that safe space to talk it through too, and have a sounding board. Número 5, por favor, en español.
Got me there.
5. That's number 5.
Mm-hmm. Who's reading?
Invites the client to consider how to move forward, including resources, support, and potential barriers.
So again, that's like action again, right? But we're bringing the resources into it this time. I interrupted you, Anthony.
So maybe if you are an expert in some sort of niche or area, this is where you can sort of come forward a little bit and use your knowledge.
Nope.
No?
Wrong answer.
Well, not no. Hold on. Let me continue. In the sense of tools or available things to use. So not like, oh, this is what you should do, but, oh, here are the tools and resources that I know that you could choose from.
Wrong.
No? Not even that?
You are turning into a consultant right there. You have just morphed into a consultant. You are no longer a coach.
Can we shut off his feed?
I know, right?
3 strikes.
Bye, Anthony.
So it's, what resources do you need along the way? What are the things that you have already in place? What do you know you need to get? What are the possible unknowns that we can discover here in our discussion? What does the steps to follow through with finding out all of that concept?
Can we take a moment and acknowledge how beautiful Lisa's hair looks, by the way? Just wanted a little side note there.
Thank you. Get back to work.
So, well, and it's easy. This is actually something our students struggle with a lot, is they will look,
I do too.
They're like, but wait, what if I have a book, or I have a technique, or I have and what is your answer to them, Dan, typically?
Not at first. Get the client into problem-solving mode. Our job is to help the client be self-reliant, not to give them the resource. Get them into problem-solving mode, tap them out, get them into what I call mental muscle failure. And then if you have a resource that you think might help, because we don't know, you think it might.
Cautiously.
Ask, may I share?
9 to 1. They've got to come up with 9 ideas. Okay, I made that number up, but the point is they've got to do some work. They've got to do the heavy lifting before we run to their rescue, and that's what we're doing when we give them that information.
Sue Bowles has a question, guys. Do we want to answer Sue's question?
Yeah, I'll just finish it on really quick. So what we're doing with what Lisa was just sharing there, the 9 things, we're helping them to build a new neural network of problem solving. That's our job. Not to say, here, read this book or go do this spreadsheet.
They can do that with Google.
But it was funny. We were talking to potential facilitators, and one of the questions we ask is this question, like, but I have all this advice, and what's my value? How do you respond to that? And a great answer said, well, if you want to give advice, you better have a lot of insurance. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic.
Where do we hear that from? Anyway.
I like to quote Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
So Sue says, one thing I run into, and I'm still working through, how do you present options and exercises without being leading or being homework?
Well, you are leading when you're presenting it to them, right? So the way to do it is ask them what they can do between now and next session that supports the direction that they're moving in. But that's after you have, I use this statue concept. I go, imagine this statue. What's around the statue? What's above the statue? What's below the statue? What is the shadow doing with the statue? So all of these concepts we're talking about and that potential direction that they're working towards. And then now that you've uncovered all of this, what's going to support you between now and next session? Your findings.
If I can, I'd like to play devil's advocate here for a sec. Isn't a coaching tool a resource?
Yeah.
Define coaching tool.
Yeah.
So we'll go with like SWOT analysis, which was kind of brought up earlier today. Is using SWOT analysis with your client, is that something that is a no-go zone? Something you don't want to add into the coaching session?
So go ahead, Lisa.
No, you're here. You're visiting. You're not here every time.
Okay.
I'm here every week.
That's a good question.
So
SWOT analysis
if we're
is questions, right? It's just visual questioning, right?
There's two different ways we could look at it in the flow of conversation. So I hear that you want to take this action step or this thing. Can we break it down into looking at it in smaller ways? We could look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. What would you like to look at first? That's cooperative communication. If at the end of the session we said something like, I think before you take this action, you should really do a full SWOT analysis on this idea.
Yeah, exactly.
That's giving homework, and you don't do it that way.
Exactly, precisely. And so in the first instance, you asked permission, and you asked if it was something they were interested in doing. Maybe the client even brings that up. I'd like to break this into smaller steps, and then as a coach, could I say, well, how do I guess we've asked? Then we would still ask. We don't need SWOT analysis, really, at any point. Now,
what does smaller steps mean? Just stay right with them.
We do use these kind of tools in intake sometimes, though, before you've even gotten to the meeting, that where we will have them fill out like an assessment, a life wheel, something of those that nature, and that is done in essence to inform us, but also to inform the client of what maybe work they want to do within the bounds of your session as well. But that typically happens prior. Can you introduce those tools once you've already begun?
Sure.
How do you do that?
You go, I have a tool.
Take it and do it.
Do it anyways. And if you don't do it, you get karate chopped. No.
Lisa, karate chopping school of life coaching.
There you go. So you're going to introduce tools as the client has provided you that information. It's really interesting that the client does tell you when that tool is welcome to be invited, and they do. They may not know the name of the tool, they may not know what they're talking about, but because you know the tool, it can get integrated in that fashion. Would you agree, Dan?
Mm-hmm.
I would also say the caution, the difference between a tool and like a book or a guru or a read this by so-and-so is that those things are going to give you a process. They're going to give you answers. They're not letting the client think for themselves. A tool that asks questions, that encourages brainstorming, that isn't just saying you should do this, but it's another way for the client to explore their own, autonomy. Those kind of tools are much more appropriate in the setting of a life coaching session or etc. But that's why recommending a book is maybe not always the right thing, because you're giving them the answers in a different form.
Yeah.
Right.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say really quickly, when I think coaching tool, I think explorative. When I think resource, I think something you go online and you're sitting down and reading through it, and it's got a statement to it. Again, a coaching tool to me is something that I see as an explorative type deal.
Yeah, I think the tool helps create uncovery and discovery, where the resource, particularly with students, when they ask about giving a resource, it's more directed towards solving the problem rather than creating discovery.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the difference between a student and a coaching client, right? if you're coming to CLCI's class, we're going to give you a ton of resources because that's what we do as a school, right? And that is what we're meant to do. But as a coach, we don't need to have that in our arsenal, right? She says, I don't know a lot and press from another angle. One of the things I used this recently, and it was one I got from Lisa, was tell me more about what you don't know. And it worked beautifully. So I thank you for that, Lisa, by the way.
Those I don't knows really don't have I don't know behind it. They're either nervous about saying it because other people have criticized them. They have been unsupported in the directions, or they have that fear of failure, that spaghetti against the wall concept. Let's even just have fun with this. Let's just be as silly as possible. In my office, not this office, my coaching office, one of the things I did is I had a whiteboard, which was actually clear, and I would write on there all of the silly things. We'd put all the fun things. We'd put all the serious things. We just plugged away at different information. And then all of a sudden that client has ownership of the direction, what they want to do, where they want to go, because now they haven't been shut down.
I would call it a clear board, not a whiteboard. Yeah. But
there you go. The clear board. Nobody knows what I'm talking about when I say that.
It was really cool when I used that tool. That tell me more about what you don't know. Even the client went, "That's a really good question." Because it opens that up where because sometimes it's just our default. That I don't know is our default. It's like our safe space. It's the I don't really want to go there, but I'm kind of because I just don't feel like it right now, And so sometimes just asking them makes them go, "Oh, okay, wait, okay, I do."
And then we say, "That's a really good question," so I can buy time to answer the really good question.
Okay, let's move on to the next point. Anthony, do you want to read it? You're awful quiet.
Number 6, partners with the client to summarize learning and insight within or between sessions. Partners with the client to summarize learning and insight within or between sessions.
I'm curious about that.
This one is a little curious to me.
Yeah.
So,
I think we address this partnering sort of question. You yourself, the coach, aren't okay. So this could be part of reflecting back what the client just said to you, but also going forward and saying, is this correct, what I'm hearing? A summary of what we've learned is this, this, and this. Trying to get the client to either agree or identify things that what did they learn.
I think that what you're talking about definitely applies in the coaching session. In this space, because we're coming to the conclusion of the competencies, I'm going to go with that place of before they leave, what's their ownership in that process? What are they going to do between now and that next session? And what do they need to be aware of to follow through with that? That would be my take on it since it's towards the end.
I think it's also the O in the go learn too, isn't it? It's which is our O. I know it's the O, but I don't know what I think it's
ownership.
Ownership. There you go.
You greet them, and then you take some out. You go, okay, so what happened over the last week? And you have that little bit of time where you can sort of summarize what's been going on and what do we need to work on next, right?
And the word summary there also is make it brief. Like let's wrap this up in a nutshell rather than rerunning the entire game tape. Just give me the highlight reel of the touchdown passes and runs. That could take the whole
session. That could take yeah.
But I'm going to ask them to give it back to me.
Exactly. Yep.
Not me give it back to them.
Correct.
And we don't get mired in it either, because that would just be coaching the ghost again. That would be another form of coaching the ghost. It's just more recent. It doesn't have to be too long ago. It could be just a couple days ago. So, all right, let's talk about number 7, because number 7 is critical.
Can we go back to number 6?
No,
quickly?
We can't.
Okay, all right. We'll move on.
What's important to you about going back to number 6, Jerome?
Yeah.
I was genuinely curious about this. We'll go over it quickly. Number 6, partners with the client to summarize learning an insight within or between sessions. With the between part, is that you checking in with your client in between sessions, or that you asking your client? Because this is all them, right? So, okay.
What did you learn?
The session, you ask them what happened between now and the last session, essentially. It's not that you're like hanging out with them throughout the week or two before you see them again.
All right.
What happened for you in those other boring 6 days, 23 hours that you weren't in my glowing presence?
Yes, exactly. Okay, so number 7, my favorite one at all of them all. Celebrates. Go read it, Jerome.
Celebrates the client's progress and success. So you go out to the bar with them, have drinks, party at their house, do some drugs. That's what we mean, right?
Party.
And they buy because they love your work.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
What do we actually mean by
Ebony's life coaching for partiers.
Does that mean as a coach I get to celebrate my success because I brought my client to where they need to, or does it
with your friends when the client isn't present? And you sure go ahead and take all the credit you want, but in front of your client, you do not.
What we actually mean is that whatever progress looks like for a client, even if it's in a direction you yourself didn't anticipate, or maybe think about privately, they've made progress. They've made some sort of work towards a goal.
Celebrating is critical. Like, it is critical because we work and we work and we work and we work. And if we don't take that beat to have that celebration and that reward moment, what happens is you never get that gratification. It doesn't solidify, it doesn't sink in, and it can drain the life out of you.
It feels like we're always treading water and never getting anywhere. And those high five moments are huge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's always in that space of waiting for the other shoe to drop, versus celebrating that experience.
It's so if anybody's ever interacted with a narcissist or worked, it's a thing where you always feel like with them you're chasing carrots, like you are, and you're never getting to the reward. There's always more work. There's never a celebrating moment, and it's a bummer because it's draining. It's one of the most draining things in the world. If you've had a boss like this or anybody where no matter how hard you work, they never give you the pat on the back. They never acknowledge what you're doing. That in itself can be one of the most draining and soul-sucking experiences of your life. Honestly, it can't.
That's some tasty stuff.
You've met my old employers.
Yes, I have met your old employers. But I'm sure everybody's experienced that at some point, and that is the importance of that. Setting a milestone and having the celebration when you reach it, no matter how small. And that's why for so many people that are goal oriented and rewards oriented, you need that celebration to fuel the next step, really.
What happens if you encounter a client who has a hard time accepting that sort of praise or success for like the small milestones? What if they're so they got the blinders on, they have the goal, and they won't allow themselves to enjoy the small successes until they finally get that sort of perfection? And they're sort of, I think a lot of perfectionists
beat the celebration into them is what you do at that point.
So the idea of this celebrate is not about us celebrating the client. It's about getting our client to feel celebration is due for them. I don't know. Say it better, Dan.
It's pulling the awareness from them that they took the step and asking, how do you feel about it? What's your experience with it? And then doing a congratulations. So we don't throw the congratulations first, just like we don't throw the resource first. How are you feeling that you took this step? And it could even be, we've been talking about success. Maybe it's not, maybe they took a step and it feels like failure.
That's what I was.
But the real success is the courage to take that step and let it be what it was. Well, and that's how you feel in knowing that you even took the action to start moving, even though it didn't necessarily go the way you anticipated.
Well, there's the negative brain bias thing. We are often very critical on ourselves. We are, as human beings, we often see ourselves. I mean, we are more quick to go to a space of self-criticism and lack of empathy for ourselves and our own experience, than we often are with others, right? So we can, as a coach, sit and see these successes, maybe where somebody else is only seeing the failures. And that's when you ask those questions to maybe open them up and open up their mind to the space that maybe this wasn't a failure. Maybe failures are just accelerators to change. And
so there's a weight scale that John Gottman came up with through his research and development of watching couples and things like that. He said there's for every 5 negative, there's only 1 positive. So the 1 positive equates to 5 negative. Interestingly enough. So if we got 5 negative things coming on and only 1 positive, we can see how that negative bias kind of rules our world in a sense.
I think Dan gives a great example of this in class is if you're walking down the street, the one where, and you walk down the street 5,000 times, but one time you're walking down the street and a bear comes out and mauls your friend to death. That is forever going to be the street where your friend was mauled by a bear to death. Mind you, you've walked down it 4,999 times without this problem, but we will forever have that ingrained into our brain because that was a traumatizing experience, right?
And that's the street that I then put my enemies in shirts that say friends, and we start walking down that street together.
I love it. Yes. This is no, it's a good street. Walk down the street, friend.
Perfectly fine street.
All right, so let's on that note, and in our last few minutes here, partners with client to close the session, number 8 of 8. I like that they did 8 in the 8th one as well. It's very, I think it was a deliberate choice on their part. I just like to say that.
But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, we've kind of discussed all of the bits and pieces of closing out the session with the client, what we're doing in the beginning.
I'll say this though, my most awkward moment is closing the session. Like that for me sometimes can be the most awkward, weird moment for me. I don't know why, not always, but it just feels like, okay, we're done now. Bye.
It's the feeling you get
if you did know.
It's the same feeling you get when you're talking to someone and you're like, okay, like time to go, and you're like inching your way to the door and you're continuing the conversation and like it just won't let you go, even though you like got your hand on the doorknob, you're halfway out, and like just conversation is still happening, and you're sending out signals like it's time to go, but this person's just going at it. And it's partners with the client to close the session is a very nice, polite way to say, stop talking. We're done.
Well, I know.
Dan had a great question, though. What was your question, Dan? I heard you.
Brooke, I heard you say you don't know why. What if you did?
What did I not know?
So awkward.
It was just like a few minutes ago. I've already moved on.
Well, let's just pause here and let it catch up to us.
So why don't I know? Well, I do know.
And what is that learning that we are facilitating in this moment?
Most of the time it's because, I've had both experiences where there was a very clear ending and where there wasn't. And it can be done very easily. Now I've discovered. I will say there were moments earlier in my coaching sessions where I was like, we can't end ever. But now I'm just very kind of like, okay, this is it. We're done. Time is up. And I just remain conscious of that clock. And then I know when to I know when to not ask that question, right? Don't go here, because if you go here, it's going to open up a can of worms, and we can save it for next time if we need to go there. And so that is also critical. And I think that's something that you learn as a coach. And it's maybe not something that you can be taught necessarily, is knowing when to not open up that can of worms, because otherwise it's going to be no longer an hour session. It's going to be an hour and a half long session.
I think the one that I hear the most is in sample sessions when I'm mentoring and we're coming around. We've met the threshold for the time. We've met the client is nailed. They've come with their action steps, and then I can't tell you how many times I hear, "Is there anything else?"
No,
not there, no. You're done. Out the door. Thanks. What'd you learn today? Same time next week? Awesome. See you then.
Okay.
Why is that, Dan? What happens when you ask that question? Exactly.
At the end of a session, you said it a few moments ago. You could open up not only one can of worms, but probably like a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket of them.
Bro,
And nobody wants that many worms around. I don't care how much fishing you're doing. That's a lot of worms. So that is it. We have wrapped up. We have finished all of the core competencies. I think quickly we should just recap the sections. We could just say like one nice thing about all these core competencies. What did we learn in this process of going through all 8 of them? What is our takeaway, our primary takeaway from all 8? We think about them all together. About the new core comp, I really like the updates. I do. I think they are.
I think they're important. I think they matter in the sense of it gives you what an ethical coach is in alignment with.
I think it's also very cohesive too. There's no areas in this that are contradictory or are confusing. It's very kind of a straightforward, this is what we do, this is how we do it, abide by this, and stay within these realms. And I think they have laid it out in such a way that is very is easy to understand for coaches through this, and grateful for that. Love the updates, by the way.
And they when we honor them and follow them as coaches, they're really designed to empower the client.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is what it's all about anyway.
And that's what this coaching model is. I know one of the questions they asked us as a school when they introduced these was, how are you guys teaching or demonstrating the coaching model? What the coaching, and this is the coaching model. This is the definition therein, right? At least by ICF standards, which is the ones we abide by. So,
exactly.
My
there are other, now real quick, there are other approaches, let's say, to coaching, but why do we choose ICF? I know we've briefly. Why is this for us the end all be all?
It's the best. They've set a standard. The standard is very workable and client centered. And I think because they are client centered, it aligns with who I am as a coach, and who I always have been as, if you will, any times that I've been a teacher. It's all about that client, and it's not a place where I have to be the end of all the information.
I think too, it makes coaching its own thing, right? This is not
ethical, moral. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely separates us from the consultants, from the therapists, from the psychiatrist, from it all, right?
Defining.
So that coaching can stand on its own and be, this is what coaching is. Whereas a lot of other approaches can be kind of mired in that gray area, right?
Definitely muddied, not clear. Mm-hmm.
And they're not, as Lisa was saying, they're not only the standard, they're the gold standard. And they're the biggest organization in coaching looking toward doing this kind of work.
Yeah,
globally. 130 countries and 40,000 members.
Well, and I mean, they're honestly, the U.S. government has acknowledged them pretty much as the foremost governing body in coaching. So I am a supporter, and I like it, and I'm a purist as well. It's amazing when you just stick to this model, and I've seen it, I've done, and it's been a part of it. It's amazing to see the way it works and how effective it is and empowering it is. And
keep it simple. It's always about keeping it simple. Anthony, you were going to say something a few moments ago. I'm not sure if it still works.
No, I was going to say my takeaway from going through the updated core competencies and would be that ICF is allowed to change their competencies, and not everything they say is written in stone for the end of time. They recognize that they've only been around for 26 years, 25 years. And relatively speaking, in the whole grand scheme of any sort of field of practice and learning, coaching as a established field hasn't been around relatively that long. So they're still not, I wouldn't say working out the kinks, but as time goes on, they're seeing what works and what doesn't. And you are able to trust that they are able to see, okay, this is what does work for clients. Let's adjust the core competencies to reflect that, because we want to be going into the future always improving the way we coach clients.
And that's it. You're right. They do a lot of research. They don't just up and decide. They have a lot of research through the years. They're asking clients, they're asking coaches. There's a lot of research behind what they've been investigating.
And I'm very skeptical of institutions that are just the way they are for 50 years. If they're not able to change and adapt, that tells me that there's something wrong. And the fact that they are able to update their competencies frequently or relatively frequently lets me know that they are improving, and it's what you want to stick with.
I think
so. I hear you saying in there that they are embodying Virginia Satir's "I am okay" poem.
Yes.
I have that memorized. Yeah.
Jerome, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say having gone through all of these, and of course, getting certified by CLCI and getting your fair share of coaching in between, you'll be able to change plenty of lives. I can tell, just as if you're an aspiring coach, and be able to charge whatever you want doing it. Really, it's gratifying work. And again, I think like what I really want to touch on, what Brooke mentioned, was the cohesiveness. It really does kind of mesh well together, and it helps make sense. I appreciate the ICF for having kind of really me going over the previous core competencies. Kind of there was a few areas where I kind of didn't completely understand. Maybe that was just because I was new to the coaching realm, but coming across these new sets of core competencies, it makes things much easier on me. And I'm thinking if you are hypothetically a new coach, it's going to make things a lot easier on you for any aspiring coach.
I want to say hi to Ernest. He was giving us some.
I don't even think it has to be an aspiring coach. I think present coaches, you want to be in the know, you better know these. You know what I mean?
True.
I'm just saying. If you want to be a coach that's on the cutting edge, that knows what's going on in the coaching world, it's probably important that you are aware of these updates.
And some people will say, I don't want to be stifled. This is not stifling by any means. This is much more freeing than what probably you would imagine.
Yeah, the first time you read them, you might feel like there's all these rules. What do I do? Like, there's so much freedom within these rules. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
You have to know the rules to know how to work within them and make them whatever.
Is there finger pointing? Okay, everybody point your finger.
You got to know the rules to know how to.
You have to know the rules to know how to break them and get away with it. But in this case, we're not breaking them. So,
and if ICF is watching, we would never dare break the rules.
I have the coaching police on speed dial.
All right, so that's it. We are done. It is time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we have covered all 8 core competencies. That's exciting. And check out Certified Life Coach Institute. We certified coaches in our ICF accredited in 3 days. So we're award winning as well.
Yay!
All right.
Have a
beautiful day.